They called her Miss Carla, not Mrs. Boone, not Carla from finance, just Miss Carla, the cleaning lady. Every morning at 5:40, long before the lobby lights flickered on or the marketing team started power walking through the glass entrance in their Bluetooth headsets and venti lattes, she was already there. The wheels of her supply cart squeaked like a tired confession, echoing softly against the marble floors of Ellison Grant and Company, one of the oldest investment advisory firms in Portland, Oregon. Her uniform was a muted navy blue, bleached in some places from years of scrubbing disinfectant into conference room chairs and elevator walls. Her shoes were worn nearly flat, not from neglect, but from repetition. Over 10,000 days of the same hallway, same badge scan, same cart. Carla moved with a rhythm that didn't ask for attention. It was the rhythm of someone who knew she wasn't being watched, and more importantly, that she wasn't supposed to be. To the suits that passed her in the halls, she was background noise. The hallway ghost. They talked over her, around her, sometimes even through her. She'd become part of the office like the framed stock market charts or the ficus by the water cooler. Rarely thanked, often ignored, but never absent. She kept a rag in her pocket, a quiet look on her face, and an ear tuned to everything. There were a few kind ones, usually the interns still naive enough to say, "Good morning," or hold the door open. Some of them would even offer her leftover pastries from team breakfast, smiling like they were breaking some corporate norm by acknowledging her existence. Carla would accept with grace, always replying with a soft, "Thank you, sugar," and tucking the gift away for later. But most had long adopted the company culture. Act like janitors don't exist. Carla wasn't bitter, at least not back then. She listened. That was her gift. She heard the jokes told too loudly over lunch breaks, the passive-aggressive jabs from junior partners trying to sound important. She learned how the office truly ran, who was kind, who was dangerous, who played dirty, and who just pretended not to notice, all without saying a word. There was this one time, 8, maybe 9 years in, when a young exec named Brendan Clay left a full sandwich balanced on the edge of a trash can, as if placing it inside would have cost him points with the universe. Carla picked it up without complaint. As she tossed it, Brendan walked by, glanced at her with a look of bland entitlement, and said, "Hey, make sure this carpet's dry before the 4 o'clock with Valor Group." Not even a please, just an order barked like she was the help in a hotel lobby. She smiled and nodded. The next day, he spilled espresso on the same carpet and then muttered loudly that maintenance must have slacked off. Carla heard it. Everyone did. But no one looked up. She nodded again, mop in hand. It wasn't the first time. Wouldn't be the last. Then there was Paul Harrington, a senior partner whose cologne arrived 10 seconds before he did. Loud, smug, and deeply unaware, he once chuckled to his assistant, "Can you imagine working here your whole life and not even having a desk?" They both laughed. Carla stood 10 feet away, washing fingerprints off the glass door. She paused for half a second, just long enough to register the sting, then kept moving. None of them knew who she was. None of them cared. That's what made it all so perfect. You see, Carla Boone didn't need their acknowledgement. She didn't crave their respect, because she knew something they didn't. She owned more of Ellison Grant and Company than anyone in that building, quietly, legally, strategically. But no one, not even the board, knew that. Not yet. On that particular Tuesday morning, she moved past the frosted glass doors leading to the executive suite, paused briefly to polish a brass nameplate with her cloth, and caught sight of the logo, EGC, EST, 1999. She stared at it longer than usual, almost as if remembering something. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket, just once, a single message. "We're ready when you are." She put the phone away. Her face didn't change, but her step did. From the outside, it looked like any other day. Carla checking trash bins, Carla pushing her cart, Carla humming faintly under her breath as she wiped down the kitchenette counter on the third floor. But internally, something had shifted. She wasn't just cleaning that day. She was preparing. Long before she held a mop in that building, she sat at a chipped dining table in Tacoma, Washington, reviewing spreadsheets and business plans late into the night with her husband, Leon Boone. That was back when Ellison Grant wasn't even incorporated yet. Just an idea scribbled on cocktail napkins, built on hustle and hope. Leon had ambition in his blood. He grew up running numbers for his grandfather's pawn shop and doing inventory at his mother's small shipping business. Carla, on the other hand, was quiet brilliance. She didn't raise her voice in meetings, but she saw through numbers like they were glass. She could smell a flaw in a proposal before it hit the page. In early 1999, Leon and a friend named Harold Ellison pulled together savings, took out loans, and opened a tiny financial planning firm in downtown Tacoma. 3 employees, 1 printer, no clients. But they had Carla. She was the first investor. She put in $68,000, every penny of the life insurance policy her father had left her. "Put it in Leon's name," she'd said, holding his hand across their tiny table. "I don't need to be on the sign. I just want it to work." "Are you sure?" he asked. "I am," she said, "but get it in writing." And so they did. Legal documents, contracts, silent partnerships. Carla wasn't on the website, but she was in the paperwork, right where it counted. For a while the company soared. Harold networked like a politician. Leon handled the clients. And Carla watched. She managed the books, corrected reports, filed LLC protections under her name as a precaution. But then came 2005, a storm, a truck, a late client dinner, and a freeway exit that came too fast. Leon died before the ambulance even arrived. Carla didn't cry at the hospital. Not then. She sat in the hallway with the paperwork in her purse and something else forming quietly inside her. Harold gave a rushed eulogy at the funeral, focused more on moving forward than honoring the past. Barely said Leon's name. Didn't mention Carla at all. That was the first sign. The second came 2 weeks later, when Carla received a notice. Harold had filed updated corporate documents, removing Leon's name and claiming full authority. There were no meetings, no explanations, just erasure. He assumed she'd walk away. He didn't know her. She had copies, originals, notarized and sealed. Her ownership share was still intact. She could have sued, could have gone public, hired a lawyer, and torn the company apart. But she didn't. She waited. Because Carla understood something Harold never did. Power means nothing if you use it too early. So she vanished. From the legal front, from public view, from meetings. Until 5 years later, when a classified ad appeared in the Portland Chronicle, hiring overnight custodial team, experience preferred, background checks required, EGC Tower. She clipped the ad, folded it twice, and smiled. 2 days later, she applied with a fake resume, borrowed an old address from a cousin, and walked into her company for the second time, this time through the back entrance holding a mop. No one recognized her, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Carla Boone became a ghost with a name badge. She clocked in at 6 p.m., clocked out at 2 a.m., 5 nights a week, 50 weeks a year. Her job was simple. Wipe the desks, mop the floors, empty the bins. No questions, no conversations. Just clean, leave, repeat. But every night, she was also doing something else. Watching. She took the job under the name Carla Simmons. Nobody thought twice. The admin who hired her barely glanced at her paperwork. The HR manager who handed her the uniform only said, "Break rooms on the second floor. If you need gloves, take extras. Budget's tight, but we're not stingy on supplies." She nodded, smiled, said thank you. That was her mask. Behind it, Carla was constructing a mental blueprint of the building, floor by floor, department by department, personality by personality. Within the first month, she could tell which VP always left early and which executive assistant was secretly running 3 departments from her desk. By month 6, she knew which office doors never locked properly, which printers glitched when overloaded, and which conference rooms had air vents just wide enough to let sound pass through. No one knew she was listening. They didn't even lower their voices around her. That's the thing about being invisible. They forget you have ears. In year 2, she started taking notes, at first just in her head, then scribbled into a small black journal she kept buried in her locker behind a bag of off-brand cleaning wipes and a pack of peppermint gum. She wrote down everything, not just dates and names, but tone, emotion, intent. January 12th. Paul Harrington. Why pay bonuses to assistants when the interns do it for free? April 3rd, Brenda Tozer, HR. Push the new insurance plan. They won't read the fine print anyway. July 19th, Clay, again. Cut the warehouse Christmas budget. We'll comp it with cupcakes. They'll smile. None of it surprised her. What did surprise her was how normalized it all became. Greed wasn't hidden. It was policy. Disrespect wasn't punished. It was practice. By year 5, Carla knew the company better than its own founders ever did. She saw it transforming from a scrappy, client-first firm into a cold, algorithm-chasing empire. Employees weren't partners anymore. They were statistics, measurable, expendable, replaceable. And the people running the show? Harold Ellison had retired with a golden parachute and a building named after him. In his place stood a new CEO, Preston Drake. Ivy League, stone jawline, always smiling just a little too wide. The type of man who practiced charm in the mirror. Carla recognized him instantly, not because they'd met, but because men like Preston always had the same scent: expensive soap, unearned power, and the quiet terror of ever being seen for who they really are. Preston brought with him a culture of polish, new branding campaigns, sleek LED displays, and open-floor concepts that made it easier for managers to watch the staff. But beneath the fresh paint, nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Performance reviews became weaponized. Benefits were quietly scaled back. Raises froze due to inflation projections, while executive bonuses doubled to retain talent. Carla heard it all from the shadows. Cafeteria corners, restrooms left half clean so she could overhear. Boardroom doors cracked open just enough. She learned how they joked about junior employees, how they treated the accounting department like a joke, how they expected the warehouse team to handle Black Friday shifts without complaint or compensation. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She recorded. On her 7th work anniversary, she celebrated by staying an extra hour to scan archived paper trails in the sub-basement. Nobody checked those boxes anymore. They were filed, forgotten, but not to her. There she found budget records, benefit rollbacks, internal memos about layoffs planned months in advance. She took photos, quietly, phone on silent, flash off, every detail tagged, dated, stored on a secure offline drive. Over time, she upgraded her system. A burner laptop at home, a burner email address only she and her lawyer knew, weekly backups, no trace. Carla didn't just want revenge, she wanted evidence, the kind that made liars fold in silence. By year 10, Ellison Grant had ballooned into a 700-employee monster with offices in 3 states. But the Portland HQ remained the heart of the beast, and Carla, still unnoticed, still in uniform, was now its most informed soul. She knew which door buzzed when you typed 4732, which manager was cheating the expense account, and which execs were sleeping with each other behind closed doors. And more than that, she knew what was broken in the soul of this company. There was a moment in year 11, small but unforgettable. A custodian named Marcus, barely 21, asked for a night off to visit his dying grandmother. He was told no. When he took it anyway, he was fired via email. Carla found the M. Cynthia, the night shift janitor with 2 jobs and a diabetic daughter. Anthony, the mailroom clerk who hadn't taken a sick day in 6 years, but got written up for being 3 minutes late. Jocelyn, the receptionist who taught herself coding in her spare time, only to be passed over for a promotion in favor of Preston's golf buddy's son. All of them were stories. All of them were receipts. Carla was collecting them like firewood, and the match was getting closer. Then came the meeting she wasn't supposed to hear. Year 13, winter. She was on the 5th floor, pretending to dust a painting in the hallway. Inside the conference room, Preston Drake leaned back in his ergonomic chair and said, "Look, if we drop the warehouse overtime rate and combine logistics with admin under one umbrella, we save $420,000. The janitors will whine, sure. But who cares? Half of them don't even speak English." The room laughed. One of the regional directors, Sarah Kim, added, "Let's just put it in the diversity budget. We'll throw them a potluck in February." More laughter. Carla stood still, rag in hand, heart frozen. They weren't whispering. They weren't even hiding it. She went home that night and didn't sleep. She sat on her couch, lights off, burner laptop glowing on her knees, and uploaded a copy of her latest recordings into a cloud folder she titled Operation Takedown, EG&C. That was the moment she stopped being a janitor. She became the architect of collapse. Year 14, she hired a second attorney, Maya Vaughn, sharp, young, unapologetic. Carla met her at a diner 2 cities away, always wearing the same plain brown coat, hair tucked, no makeup. They went through it all, page by page, date by date, every infraction, every forged budget, every discriminatory comment. Carla had it all, and Maya knew it. You know, Maya said quietly, you could burn this whole building down. I'm not burning it, Carla replied. I'm just pulling back the curtain. Maya smiled. When? Not yet, she said. Not until they're all in the room. I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel in control. Why? Carla leaned back, her voice steady. Because the fall hurts more when you think you're standing tall. And so she waited. One final year. She wore the uniform. She pushed the cart. She emptied bins. But now she was marking time. She watched as Preston Drake slashed bonuses for floor staff and gave himself a new office with a private espresso bar. She watched as Cynthia's vacation request to care for her daughter was denied. She saw Marcus's replacement get written up for using the wrong brand of mop and fired on the spot. She waited until the day she saw the final straw sitting in the hallway, melting into the carpet. But that comes later. First, Carla had to move the last pawn into place. She needed to test the system one last time to see if it was as rotten as she feared. So she asked for something small, a mop replacement, just one. She filled out the request form, submitted it through the official channel, signed C. Simmons, night custodial. No response. 2 weeks. 3. Then she got a reply. Mop replacements for janitorial are not considered priority level maintenance expenses. Request denied. Carla printed that email, pinned it above her desk, right next to the company's mission statement poster that said, "We rise by lifting others." She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, deliberately, she circled the words "lifting others" in red pen and wrote underneath, "You forgot to look down."
It was a Tuesday. The kind of gray-skied, bone-damp Portland Tuesday where the rain doesn't pour, it lingers, soft, stubborn, and everywhere. Carla had just finished her usual third-floor route, wiped the counters in the kitchenette, restocked the flimsy paper towels, and replaced the sugar packets labeled organic, though they clearly weren't. The building was unusually loud that night, laughter from the 8th floor, a scent of catered food lingering in the air, truffle oil, overpriced sliders, and the unmistakable arrogance of a birthday party thrown with someone else's money. Carla pushed her cart back toward the main hallway, humming under her breath, when she stopped cold. Dead center in the hallway sat a paper plate. A half-eaten slice of birthday cake slumped to one side, the frosting smeared and melting into the carpet. A used fork stuck upright in the sponge like a middle finger. Chocolate was mashed into the fibers. It wasn't just careless, it was deliberate. No one drops cake like that in a hallway. Not with that kind of placement. Not with that kind of disdain. Carla stood still for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming above her, the hallway empty save for the smell of cheap buttercream. Her eyes didn't blink. She bent slowly, gracefully, and picked up the plate, holding it in one hand like it was something sacred or cursed. That's when she heard the voice. "You missed a spot." She turned her head, just slightly. Standing at the end of the hall, hands in his pockets, was Preston Drake. His suit jacket hung open like he was trying to look casual, like this hallway was his living room. He had the smirk of a man who had never had to fight for his seat at any table. "Excuse me?" Carla said, her voice quiet, neutral. He walked toward her slowly, pointing to the floor next to where she'd just cleaned. "Right there," he said. "We've got a client coming in for a late walkthrough. Think you can give this a second pass?" There was no stain, no spot, not even a scuff. But Preston wasn't pointing at dirt. He was pointing at her. Carla straightened, cake plate in one hand, mop handle in the other. She didn't move. Didn't respond. Preston chuckled, as if she'd told a joke he liked. I swear, he said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. Sometimes I think you people just pretend to clean so you can stay on the clock. Her eyes narrowed. Not enough for him to notice, but just enough for the walls to remember. What people is that? She asked. Preston raised an eyebrow. Oh, come on, he said with a little laugh. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying, if I paid you more, maybe you'd notice the mess before I did. He turned away like he'd made a point worth writing down. Carla didn't flinch. She stood there, fingers tightening slightly around the mop handle. Then she nodded once. I'll make sure it's spotless, she said. He clapped his hands once like she was a dog who'd finally obeyed. That's what I like to hear, he said. Keep it clean, miss. He didn't even finish her name, just turned his back and walked off, leaving the hallway as silent as it was before. Carla didn't move for a long time, not because she was shaken. She wasn't. Not anymore. That had stopped years ago. What she felt now wasn't rage or hurt. It was certainty. She looked down at the cake in her hand, then slowly walked to her cart, dropped it into the trash bin, and peeled off her gloves one finger at a time. She didn't go back to cleaning. Not that night. Instead, she walked down the back stairwell, past the janitor's locker room, past the old supply closet no one used anymore, and down into the basement archives. Her badge, though labeled night maintenance, had enough clearance to open the records room. It was a quiet oversight, made possible by a manager who once left his ID card unattended during a Christmas party. Carla had kept a copy of his access strip, cloned it with help from a cousin in Tacoma who did freelance IT. She never used it, until now. The records room was dark, cold, and smelled faintly of toner and time. She moved quickly, with the precision of someone who had been here before, pulled files, printed documents, took photos of payroll statements, internal memos, quarterly reports. But the one file she printed on thick ivory paper, the one she laid flat, centered perfectly on the table, was the executive compensation report from Q3. It showed Preston Drake had approved a personal performance bonus of $55,000. Operational excellence, the line item read. Meanwhile, the same report showed cuts in custodial budgets, reductions in overtime pay, and a note to reassess non-essential benefits for warehouse and admin staff. Carla didn't curse. She didn't shake her head. She folded the report, placed it in a manila envelope, and tucked it into her coat. Then she left. When she stepped back into the night air, the rain had thickened. She didn't run. She walked, back to her car, back to her small apartment where the living room doubled as an archive and the bedroom housed 3 years of surveillance notes in color-coded folders. She didn't eat dinner. She didn't turn on the lights. She sat in the dark and called one number. Maya picked up on the second ring. It's me, Carla said. You ready? Maya asked. Carla looked at the manila envelope in her lap. I'm sure. There was a pause. Then, it's going to be messy. I've been cleaning up messes my whole life, Carla replied. This one just happens to wear cufflinks. Maya exhaled. All right, I'll initiate the first step. We'll start with a motion to review shareholder control, then trigger the dormant voting clause. Carla nodded. Make sure the board knows. I want every chair filled, every eye watching. They won't see it coming, Maya said. I know, Carla whispered. That's the point. And that's how it began, not with a press release, not with a scandal, not with fire or fanfare. It began with a half-eaten piece of cake on a hallway floor, and a woman holding a mop who had waited long enough.
Maya Vaughn didn't blink when she read the full report. She didn't whistle, didn't gasp, didn't push the manila folder away like a shocked TV lawyer. She simply flipped each page with a soft flick of her thumb, highlighting here, underlining there, nodding slowly as if she were skimming a grocery list instead of a bomb. The two women sat in the back corner of a small diner just off Highway 99E in Gladstone, a place with cracked red booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. Carla liked it because no one asked questions there. The coffee was terrible, the lighting worse, but it had no cameras. That mattered. Maya closed the folder carefully. She looked up and said, "We're not just talking civil leverage. This is executive-level misconduct. If we drop this in the right way, it doesn't just force a vote, it triggers a restructuring." Carla stirred her tea but didn't drink it. "That's the goal," she said. "Walk me through it again," Maya said. "Everything, from the beginning, and don't skip the legal stuff." So Carla did. She told her about the original founding agreements, about Leon Boone and Harold Ellison, about the silent partnership contracts, the irrevocable equity transfers, the clause in the Articles of Incorporation that granted full voting power to the surviving partner or their spouse upon death, if they presented themselves as such. She explained how she had stepped back, legally but not entirely, how she had retained 38.7% ownership through proxy accounts, layered LLCs, and dormant rights awaiting activation. Maya's pen scratched across her notepad, each stroke a nail in the coffin of corporate arrogance. "And you're absolutely sure Preston doesn't know any of this?" she asked. Carla looked out the window. Rain traced thin silver lines down the glass. "He once looked me in the eye and told me I was lucky to have a job," she said. "He doesn't know I helped build the floor he was standing on." Maya nodded slowly. "All right, we're not going to the press." "Not yet," Carla agreed. "We're not leaking." "No, we're going in through the front door. Clean." Carla's voice was quiet but resolute. "Like we belong there." They set a timeline. 3 weeks. Not because they needed that long, but because Carla wanted them comfortable. She wanted Preston and his boardroom clique to think everything was fine. She wanted them overconfident, underprepared, still joking about overtime cuts while their kingdom rotted under their chairs. Maya handled the legal mechanics, a formal notice to the board of directors citing dormant voting rights and a request for a private shareholders meeting to discuss leadership alignment and structural realignment. The phrasing was surgical, bland enough not to cause alarm, sharp enough to open every door. Carla signed each document with the calm of someone folding laundry. No press, no warning, no leaks. Just quiet movement behind locked doors. During the 3 weeks, Carla didn't change anything in her routine. She showed up every night, pushed the same cart, wore the same worn uniform, smiled politely when she passed someone in the hallway. She even restocked the damn powdered creamer in the third-floor kitchenette, like she wasn't about to gut the whole operation from the inside out. But something in her eyes had shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for the walls to notice. She took extra care to sweep under Preston's office door every night. Not because it needed cleaning, but because it gave her 5 quiet seconds to look at the space he thought he owned. The leather chair, the gold pen, the photo of him shaking hands with a congressman he donated to. Carla didn't hate him. She didn't have to. People like Preston weren't evil. They were careless. And carelessness, she'd learned, is more dangerous than cruelty. One evening, 2 weeks before the meeting, Carla saw something on her locker. A note, scrawled on a crumpled post-it, stuck just below her name tag. "You missed a spot." No signature, just that. She stared at it for a long time. Not out of shock, out of calculation. Someone had noticed her. Not who she really was, but that she was more than she seemed. That could have been dangerous. But Carla had prepared for that too. She peeled the note off and folded it into her journal. Another page, another receipt. By the end of the second week, the board had confirmed attendance for the meeting. Monday, 10 a.m., 8th floor, main conference room. All 12 chairs would be filled. Preston would be there. So would Sarah Kim. So would the CFO, the general counsel, and Harold Ellison's nephew, now serving as strategic advisor, despite knowing less about financial strategy than Carla's retired neighbor who played poker for Oreos. Maya called her on Friday evening. "They've confirmed everything. Legal's nervous, but silent. Preston thinks you're an external proxy for some hostile investor group. He has no clue." "Good," Carla said. "Let him sweat in silence." "And the board? They'll remember what they signed." That Sunday night, Carla packed up her locker for the last time. Not just her gloves or apron, but the journal, the flash drive, a laminated copy of her husband's death certificate, because names matter in courtrooms. She paused for a moment before closing the locker door. Then, without ceremony, She peeled off her name badge and tossed it into the trash bin, the same kind she'd emptied 1,000 times before. She left the building at 2:02 a.m. The rain had stopped. The sky was black and sharp. She drove home in silence, windows rolled down, cold air brushing her cheeks. At 6 a.m., she stood in front of her bathroom mirror. No uniform, no gloves, just a navy blazer, pearl earrings, and a quiet fire behind her eyes. She looked at herself, really looked, and for the first time in 15 years, she didn't see a ghost. She saw a founder. At 9:43 a.m., Carla Boone entered the building through the main lobby for the first time in over a decade. She didn't carry a mop. She carried a folder. And behind her, Maya Vaughn walked tall in a gray suit, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. The receptionist blinked twice when she saw Carla. Ma'am, can I help?" "Good morning," Carla said. "I'm expected." Then she stepped into the elevator and pressed 8. For the first time, she didn't have to pretend. And the people upstairs were minutes away from learning that the woman they never saw coming was already here. The conference room on the 8th floor was designed for intimidation. 12 imported leather chairs, a custom walnut table flown in from a boutique shop in Seattle, a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline like a throne view. The chandelier above was absurd, an elaborate tangle of crystal and chrome that looked like it belonged in a hotel ballroom, not a business meeting. Preston Drake stood at the head of the table, his tie loosened just enough to suggest confidence, not laziness. He smirked as the board members filed in. Meredith Calloway, his second-in-command, took her usual seat to his right. Harold Ellison's nephew Gavin slouched into a chair like he was still recovering from a hangover he thought no one noticed. The rest trickled in. Legal, HR, finance, risk. Every name that mattered. No one looked alarmed. No one had any idea. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened one final time. Carla Boone stepped into the room. Not Miss Carla, not Simmons, not the janitor. Carla Boone. She wore a navy blue blazer. Not flashy, just firm. Her blouse was cream. Her shoes, modest but polished, tapped once on the marble floor before the room even fully registered her presence. Preston's smile faltered. "I'm sorry," he said, blinking. "Maintenance is supposed to come after hours. We're in a meeting." Carla didn't blink. "I'm not here for maintenance." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Meredith raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "I do," Carla said, stepping forward. "And I believe the shareholders were properly notified." The room shifted. Not physically, but perceptibly, like a silent, sudden draft. Preston opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could, Maya Vaughn walked in behind Carla. Gray suit, briefcase in hand, steps sharp and assured. "Good morning," Maya said calmly, placing her briefcase on the table. "My name is Maya Vaughn. I serve as legal counsel for Mrs. Carla Boone, majority shareholder of Ellison Grant and Company Silence. Complete." The chandelier above them swayed slightly, as if even it wasn't ready for what came next. Carla stepped to the end of the table, the same chair where Preston usually presided, and placed a folder in front of her. She flipped it open slowly. Inside, the original Articles of Incorporation, dated 1999, signed by Harold Ellison, Leon Boone, and a third signature, Carla Denise Boone. There were shareholder agreements, notarized equity transfers, and one document, a letter sealed and witnessed, stating that upon Leon Boone's death, his 38.7% voting share would be transferred to Carla, his legal spouse. Preston blinked once, twice, then chuckled. This has to be a mistake." "It's not," Maya said. "All documents have been verified, filed, and submitted to your corporate registry." Meredith leaned forward. "I don't understand. You're saying she owns the company," Carla finished for her, "or at least more of it than anyone in this room." Preston's face went pale. "This is a hostile takeover." "No," Maya replied. "This is a legal reclamation. The only hostility came from your side, and we have 15 years of documentation to prove it." Harold's nephew muttered something, looking like he just remembered a nightmare from college finals. Carla walked slowly around the table, not circling, just observing. I've watched this place from the inside, she said quietly. Watched it change, watched it forget who built it, watched it erase names like mine because they didn't fit the new narrative. She stopped behind Preston's chair. And I've listened. To your meetings, to your jokes, to your excuses. I cleaned up after your late-night deals and your messes, literal and moral. She placed a single sheet of paper in front of each board member, one by one. This, she said, is a motion of no confidence in Preston Drake as CEO, effective immediately. Preston stood, both hands on the table. You don't know what you're doing. This company has a structure, a system. You can't just walk in and take over. Carla didn't flinch. I've been here every night for 15 years. I know where the cracks are. I know what's broken. I know who you fired without cause, who you underpaid, who you silenced. She leaned in slightly. And the real tragedy is that you never even saw me coming. Preston's voice cracked. This is absurd. Security has been notified, Maya interrupted. They will escort Mr. Drake from the building once this motion is acknowledged. The door opened again. Two security officers entered. Not dramatic, just present. Preston looked around the room for backup. None came. Meredith suddenly remembered she had a conference call. Harold's nephew started nervously scrolling his phone. The legal counsel began reviewing the documents again. Closer this time. You can't do this, Preston said. Curtis, an older board member who'd been there since the founding, finally spoke. She already did. Preston's lips parted, but no sound came out. The officer stepped forward. You're making a huge mistake, Preston muttered, grabbing his phone. You'll regret this. No, Carla said. You will. And with that, he was gone. No applause, no drama, just absence. Once the door closed, Carla turned back to the table. I'm not here to play boss, she said. I'm here to clean house. For real this time. One of the younger members, Jonas, maybe 28, clearly stunned, raised a timid hand. What do you plan to do? First, Carla gave the smallest smile. We start by listening to the people you've ignored the longest. She closed the folder. Not slammed, just closed. But understand this, she said. Taking out the trash doesn't mean the house is clean. We've got work to do. She looked around the room, her voice firm and final. And I've already started. Monday afternoon arrived with little fanfare. No press release, no celebratory emails, no dramatic changing of the guard statements. Just quiet movement, like dust being swept from corners long ignored. Carla Boone sat behind a desk on the 6th floor, not in Preston's old office with its skyline view and espresso machine, but in a modest room that used to belong to a regional logistics coordinator who'd been let go for budget streamlining. There were no framed accolades on the walls, no motivational posters, just her notepad, her calendar, and a cup of lukewarm coffee she'd poured herself from the break room pot. And still, for the first time in 15 years, the air around her was entirely her own. She had one meeting scheduled for the day, one that mattered. It wasn't with the board, not with the department heads, not even with finance. It was with the people who'd never been invited into that building's glass-walled sanctuaries. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, the warehouse drivers, receptionists, temp staff, mailroom crew, the so-called non-essentials. Carla had asked Maya to send a message through internal channels. All staff not in management are invited to a company-wide listening session. No RSVPs, just show up. No dress code, no agenda, just honesty. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. in the secondary conference hall on the 1st floor, the same room often used for compliance training and holiday potlucks. At 2:59, only 7 people were in the room. By 3:05, over 50 had arrived. Some stood by the back wall, arms crossed, suspicious. Others sat quietly in the metal chairs arranged in a half circle, eyes darting between the exits like it might be a trap. A few whispered to one another, wondering out loud if this was some new HR stunt, an empathy audit, or a soft skill rebrand. Then Carla walked in. No microphone, no podium, no security, just her, holding a legal pad and a pen. She didn't stand on a platform. She didn't clear her throat like a performer. She simply said, "Thank you for being here. and the room went still. She looked around, meeting each gaze without flinching. I know most of you have no idea who I am, and that's okay. You weren't supposed to. For 15 years, I worked in this building during the hours no one watched. I cleaned the floors you walked on, scrubbed the glass you never touched, and I listened. A murmur, a few widened eyes. I heard the laughter behind closed doors. I heard the decisions made without consideration. I saw names disappear from schedules, from payroll, from office doors, and I wrote it down. All of it. She held up the notepad. The room followed it like it was sacred. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to tell you that I see you, that you matter, and that starting today, things are going to change. A silence followed, thicker than disbelief, heavier than doubt. No one clapped. No one moved. Until a voice broke it. It was Alonzo, a warehouse driver with calloused hands and a sharp tongue. He didn't stand, just raised his hand halfway. Does this mean we get overtime again? Carla nodded once. Yes, effective immediately. And back pay for the last 2 quarters. You'll see it on Friday's check. Gasps, not dramatic, not theatrical, just small sounds of reality reshaping. Another voice, Deborah from HR, who'd survived 6 department restructures without a promotion, stood up, arms folded. And health coverage, she asked. Every year it gets smaller. Co-pays went up. Premiums went up. We had staff choosing between insulin and groceries last month. Carla looked her in the eye. We're reviewing providers, and every employee will get a vote in the selection process. No more closed-door packages. No more take it or leave it. Your health is not a line item. Another hand. Jocelyn, the receptionist who had taught herself Python during lunch breaks. What about all the people Preston let go, she asked. Some of them didn't even get reasons. Just exit emails, like ghosts. We're reopening all terminations from the last 5 years, Carla said. If you were fired without due process, you will be contacted. No guarantees of reinstatement, but your name will not be buried without a fair hearing. The silence returned. Not suspicious this time. Stunned. Then someone from the back, Carla couldn't see who, asked quietly, Are you really the owner? She smiled, software unshaken. Always have been. There was no applause, just a slow ripple of breath, like the room exhaled for the first time in years. Then something remarkable happened. A janitor, older, gray-bearded, name tag half-faded, stood up, cleared his throat, and said, Well, I've got a list. Things I've kept to myself for too long. Carla pointed to a chair near her. Start there. And he did. Then someone else joined in, and another. A driver talked about faulty loading ramps. A cafeteria worker shared how the oven had been broken for 9 months, and no one ever approved the work order. A receptionist talked about being told to wear heels to look more professional, even when standing all day. Carla didn't interrupt, didn't explain, didn't defend. She wrote every single word. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours, and when it ended, no one rushed out. They lingered. Some cried, some laughed nervously. One woman whispered to Carla as she left, I didn't think people like us got a second chance. Carla replied, We're not getting a second chance. We're taking the first one they tried to deny us. That night she stayed late, not in the executive office, in the staff lounge. No speeches, no cameras, just a whiteboard. She wrote 4 words on it, Who hasn't been heard? Then she left the marker underneath and walked out.
By Tuesday morning, the building wasn't louder, it was quieter. But not the peaceful kind. The kind of quiet that comes when too many people are listening, pretending not to. When every nod in the hallway carries hesitation. When every closed door sounds like it might be a conspiracy. Carla could feel it the moment she stepped out of the elevator. Not fear, not respect, calculation. The remaining executives were adjusting, not to her authority, but to her presence. They weren't sure yet if she was temporary or permanent, and some were already betting against her. At 9:30 a.m., Meredith Calloway requested a private alignment meeting. She didn't call it a confrontation. She didn't send it through HR, just a calendar invite, status discussion, organizational vision, 30 minutes. Carla accepted. The conference room was sterile. No coffee, no water, no pretense. Meredith entered in navy slacks and a white blouse too crisp for comfort. She sat without waiting to be invited. Carla didn't comment. "I'll get straight to it," Meredith said, folding her hands. "The board is unsettled. Your changes, your language, it's unconventional." Carla smiled, not kindly. "So was pretending I didn't exist." Meredith blinked. "I'm not here to argue past behavior." "Neither am I," Carla said. "I'm here to change future ones." A pause. Meredith leaned forward slightly. "The executive team is concerned about continuity. These listening sessions, these surprise policy reversals, they disrupt confidence. Investors don't like sudden shifts. Employees talk." "They're supposed to," Carla replied. Meredith exhaled, adjusting her posture. "Look, I know you feel empowered right now, and I don't doubt your legal position. But this company's growth, our quarterly uptick, our acquisition prospects, that didn't come from cleaning floors. It came from structure, from knowing who's in charge." Carla leaned in now, eyes steady. "You think power comes from structure. I think it comes from trust. The only reason this company grew is because people who had no voice kept the foundation from crumbling. You didn't scale leadership, you outsourced dignity. I'm done pretending that's acceptable." Meredith's lips tightened. Carla stood, gathering her folder. "If you're uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave. I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to remind everyone what integrity feels like." She left the room without waiting for a reply. By Wednesday, Carla's inbox had doubled. Emails from departments that hadn't sent a real message in years. Subject lines like, "Can we speak?" "Just a quick question," and "Things you might not know." They weren't about rebellion, they were about permission. One from a procurement clerk detailed how vendors had been overcharging logistics by 12% annually, over $3 million a year. Another from a junior systems analyst showed how internal project evaluations had been manipulated to favor certain directors' pet projects, some of which never even launched. And then there was the message from Martha Green, formerly terminated head of compliance. Subject: "I wasn't wrong, just inconvenient." Attached: a 37-page PDF with memos, flagged incidents, and internal warnings, all ignored. Carla read it twice, quietly, then she sent it to Maya. That same afternoon, the first act of retaliation came, not from outside, but inside. A memo surfaced, unsigned but distributed through back channels. It warned of operational instability under new, untested leadership and urged directors to preserve legacy processes to ensure minimal market turbulence. It ended with a line that might have been subtle if Carla hadn't spent her life decoding masks. "Sometimes buildings need structure more than sentiment." She didn't reply. Instead, she walked down to the warehouse floor. No announcement, no camera, no agenda. She watched. She watched a junior dispatcher reroute orders manually because the automated system was still broken. She watched a forklift operator retape pallets with their own duct tape because no one approved the maintenance order. She didn't interrupt, just observed. Later, she walked into the break room, erased the words, "Friday lunch budget canceled," from the whiteboard, and wrote, "Reinstated. Let's eat like we matter." By Thursday, 3 executives had asked for clarity around their roles under the evolving structure. One of them was Clay Brenton, Preston's old chief of staff. He entered her office like he still had a corner suite. "I've reviewed your policy shifts," he said, handing her a stapled packet like a complaint submission. "Frankly, some of these decisions, overtime back pay, retroactive benefits, schedule realignments, they're cost centers, risk amplifiers, and to be direct, they threaten our competitive edge." Carla didn't touch the packet. "I see," she said. "And how do you define competitive edge?" Clay straightened. "Lean spending, quick output, focused oversight, contained exposure." She tilted her head. "And where does trust fall in that?" Clay hesitated. "That's intangible." Carla leaned back. "So is rot, until the floor caves in." He left without taking the packet. That night, Carla drafted her first internal address. Not a speech, not a press statement. just a message sent via internal comms to the entire company. It read, Subject, the people who keep us standing. We talk about margins, growth, and expansion, but we forget who carried the load. Not every change will feel comfortable. Not every shift will be fast. But every person will be heard. If you've ever felt unseen, this is your turn. If you've ever whispered truth into silence, speak louder. The walls have changed. They're listening now. Carla Boone, majority shareholder co-founder, EG&C. The replies came quickly. Some were just 3 words. Thank you, finally. Some were long, but the one that stayed on her screen the longest was from an anonymous employee. You didn't just clean the building, you're rebuilding it. Carla stared at that line for a long time. Then she turned off her screen. Outside her window, the sky had turned from slate to silver. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in years, it was washing something clean.
It started with a spreadsheet. No one expected Carla to look at it. Most people didn't even remember it existed. It lived on a shared drive deep inside the compliance folder tree, titled innocently as Term Log Old Archived Final 2 V5 XLSX. The kind of file that collects digital dust, renamed too many times by too many interns. Carla opened it at 6:42 a.m. on a quiet Friday, coffee in hand, lights still off in the rest of the building. The first tab was basic, names, positions, termination dates. But Carla didn't look at the dates first. She looked at the notes column. Row 12, insubordination, challenge bonus discrepancy during staff meeting. Row 35, excessive communication, sent repeated suggestions to upper leadership. Row 47, pattern of disruption, encouraged co-workers to report unsafe conditions. They weren't mistakes, they were warnings, not to the company, but to anyone who dared care too much. Carla felt her jaw tighten. She spent the next 5 hours cross-referencing names with HR records, payroll logs, and archived emails. By noon, she had 37 names in a new folder. The erased. People whose careers had been flattened not because of performance, but because they raised their hands when no one else did. Engineers, technicians, janitors, analysts. The patterns were hauntingly consistent. Whistleblowers reclassified as troublemakers, problem solvers demoted for not being team players, staff who requested accessibility accommodations, quietly written off as not a long-term fit. She called Maya. We're opening cases, Carla said. I want every one of these reviewed. If even half of them were wrongfully terminated, we owe more than back pay. Maya didn't ask for permission. I'll draft the motion. Internal audit or full restitution? Both. That afternoon, Carla gathered her internal ops team, the handful of staff who had stayed neutral during the transition but hadn't yet chosen a side. She stood at the front of the small project room, a whiteboard behind her filled with first names and termination codes. I don't need you to believe me, she said. I need you to help me prove this. One woman raised her hand. Is this about bringing people back? No, Carla replied. This is about bringing truth back. They got to work. Over the next 10 days, Carla's team combed through years of digital files, Slack transcripts, private server memos, even security badge logs. What they found wasn't a scandal. It was a system. Documents backdated to avoid severance eligibility. Meeting notes marked confidential to shield unethical decisions. A quiet filter applied in the hiring platform to deprioritize applicants with long gaps in employment, many of whom were former EG&C staffers trying to reapply under new names. Then came the name that stopped Carla cold. Ernest Monroe. She remembered him, a night logistics supervisor, tall, quiet, liked lemon tea and jazz music. Fired 6 years ago under a vague citation, violation of reporting protocol. She dug deeper. Turned out Ernest had documented a series of safety violations in the Old East warehouse, back when faulty shelving led to a partial collapse in Storage Bay 3. He didn't leak the files. He reported them through internal channels. Weeks later, he was fired. The official reason? Failure to escalate appropriately. That phrase hit her like a slap. Ernest had done everything by the book, and the book had been rewritten to betray him. She tracked him down through LinkedIn. His profile photo was 6 years old, no current job listed. She sent a short message. Mr. Monroe, I believe you were wrongfully terminated by Ellison Grant and Company. I'd like to meet, if nothing else, to say I'm sorry. Carla Boone, majority shareholder, EG&C. He didn't reply for 2 days. When he did, it came in one line. I thought I was invisible. They met at a public library in Gresham. He wore a worn blazer, eyes guarded. She didn't wear a blazer. She wore respect. They talked for 3 hours. He told her how after EG&C, no one would touch his resume, how the termination phrasing had followed him, how he drove for rideshare companies to stay afloat, how he started playing saxophone at night just to remember what Grace sounded like. She offered him his position back. He refused. I don't want pity, he said. It's not pity, Carla answered. It's principle. He leaned forward. Then don't give me a title. Give me a purpose. She smiled. Done. Ernest Monroe became the first member of the new Truth and Review panel, an independent committee Carla formed to audit past terminations and HR violations. Not to litigate, but to listen, to document, to make the invisible visible again. He wasn't the only one. Jocelyn, the receptionist with coding skills, was brought into the internal tech review team. Martha Green, the ex-head of compliance, reinstated under a new title, Cultural Forensics Lead. And Carla didn't just restore their names, she published them. On a wall in the employee entrance lobby, beneath a simple plaque, the names they erased, the stories we remember. Visitors passed it every day. Some stopped, some didn't. But no one could say they didn't know, because now the company had a memory again. One morning, Carla received a package. No return address. Inside, a plain white envelope. A single sentence handwritten on thick paper. When they took my badge, I thought they took everything. Thank you for showing me they didn't. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Carla folded the note, placed it in the drawer beneath her calendar, and added another name to the list. Not a list of shame, a list of restoration. And this time, no one was getting erased. By the third Monday under Carla Boone's leadership, the walls had stopped whispering. They started listening, not out of fear, out of curiosity, because something strange had happened at Ellison Grant & Co. The kind of strangeness that didn't make headlines but changed hallway conversations. Meetings no longer started with PowerPoint slides and ended with strategy jargon. They started with questions, sometimes uncomfortable ones. And the most common question was, why did we do it that way? Not in outrage, in genuine confusion. It began with the printer contracts. One afternoon, Carla sat in with the procurement team, not because she wanted to audit them, but because she wanted to understand how a company with nearly $1 billion in assets still had printers that jammed 3 times a day. The answer, a vendor deal signed 7 years ago, renewed automatically every 2 years, locked in at inflated rates, and pushed through by an executive who'd later taken a job with the same vendor's board. When Carla asked why no one had challenged it, the room went silent. Then someone said, because no one ever asked us what we thought. She nodded and canceled the contract. But it wasn't about printers, it was about patterns. Patterns of unquestioned process, of fear packaged as policy, of loyalty defined by silence. She started walking floors more regularly, not as the boss, not as a spy, but as someone relearning the things she once built. She sat with IT support as they walked her through the ticket backlog. She joined lunch breaks in the warehouse cafeteria, listening to stories of near injuries, missed birthdays, first apartments. She ate vending machine pretzels with a night shift billing analyst named Nia, who admitted she hadn't spoken to a director in person in 2 years. Carla looked at her and said, now you have. They laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt unbelievable. One morning she opened the old CEO vault, not metaphorically, a literal vault, a former executive assistant, who returned voluntarily after Carla reached out, handed her the code, 4119. Leon's birthday, inside, files, paper files, physical contracts, sealed bonus agreements, handwritten notes. She found a stack of evaluations stamped confidential senior review only. They weren't performance reports. They were blacklists, names with comments like not compliant with vision, disrupts momentum, too values-oriented. She read each one, then shredded every sheet. But again, it wasn't about paper, it was about dust. The kind that settles into corners when no one's allowed to look under the furniture. She ordered an internal dust audit. That's what she called it. Not a policy review, not a restructure, just dust, culture, silence, power, unwritten rules. The audit returned shocking but unsurprising things. Departments where promotions had been exclusively internal for 8 years, but only among those who played squash with senior leadership. Expense reports where staff were reimbursed for $17 lunches, but denied $3 for bus fare. Casual Friday dress codes that were casually enforced only against certain employees. The small things. But Carla knew. It's always the small things. She called a company-wide meeting, optional attendance, no sign-in sheet, no pressure. Still, 400 people showed up. She didn't stand on the stage. She walked into the center of the room, turned in a circle, and said one sentence. "This company is dusty." People blinked. Then she continued. Not just literally, but morally, procedurally, structurally. There are rooms here that haven't been cleaned since Leon died. And I don't mean with a mop. I mean with memory, with accountability, with truth. She paused. I'm not going to start over. I'm going to start right here. And you're going to help me decide what stays and what gets swept the hell out. And then she sat down. No speech, just a pen. That day, employees filled 10 whiteboards with what they called the keep/toss wall. Keep community scholarships, holiday bonuses, floor rotation systems that build empathy. Toss the urgent review scam emails used to stress staff into overtime. The internal leaderboard for most client hours billed, without regard for quality. The don't copy the boss unless it's a win rule. Carla read everyone. She didn't always agree, but she always answered. Sometimes with a note, investigating. Sometimes with approved, you're right. Sometimes with just, I never knew. Thank you. On her way out of the meeting, an intern approached her. She couldn't have been older than 22. She held up her phone and said, "You know what you're doing, right?" Carla looked at her. "You're rebuilding a company with the people who were never in the rebuild plans. That's not just rare. That's revolution." Carla smiled. "Number, that's return." And as she walked back toward the elevator, she saw something written in marker on the edge of one of the whiteboards. Not in bold, not large, just 3 words. No more ghosts. She stopped, stared, nodded, and whispered to herself, exactly. The chandelier above the executive boardroom hadn't moved in weeks. The air in the room was still, sterile, like the space had been holding its breath since the day Preston Drake was escorted out. The chairs were still perfectly aligned. The table gleamed from weekly polishings done more out of habit than necessity. But something had changed. Or maybe something had stayed unchanged, waiting for someone to notice it. Carla Boone walked in at 6:03 a.m. No one else was there. She didn't bring a folder. She didn't bring her assistant. She didn't even bring coffee. Just a small cardboard box labeled in her own handwriting, "Forgotten Things." She placed it at the head of the table. Then one by one she pulled out the contents. A faded photo of Leon Boone standing in front of the first EG and C office in Tacoma, holding a stapler like it was a trophy. A rolled blueprint for the original logistics routing system he'd designed, still scribbled with Carla's notes in the margins. A copy of the original Articles of Incorporation, with 3 signatures, Harold Ellison, Leon Boone, Carla Boone. A folded napkin with a single number on it, the first profit calculation Leon ever ran after their second client contract. A badge, her old janitor badge. She laid them all out on the table in a quiet line of memory, not as trophies, not as proof, as testimony of presence, of weight, of labor you're not supposed to count. She pulled out one last item, a printed screenshot from the security footage of that Tuesday afternoon, the day Preston dropped the cake in the hallway. The image wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. It showed Carla, mop in hand, face half turned, while Preston pointed at the ground with that same smirk. She placed the photo beside the badge, then sat down. The silence in the room was a different kind now, not oppressive, honest. Carla spoke out loud, even though no one was there to hear it. 15 years ago, I stood in this room with bleach on my gloves and my name erased from every document that built this place. You looked at me and saw service, not stewardship. You saw labor, not legacy. She paused. I let you think that. Her voice didn't rise, but the air around it did. I let you point. I let you laugh. I let you make decisions in this room as if power belonged to the loudest man with a title. And now I take this room back. Not for me, for the ones who never got to sit here, for the ones who asked the right questions and got fired for it, for the janitors, the cafeteria staff, the interns whose ideas got stolen and buried, for the ghosts.
She looked down at her badge, then stood, picked it up, and snapped it clean in half. Because the ghosts built this building. The sound of the plastic breaking echoed gently. Carla walked to the wall behind the head chair, Preston's old throne. She took down the framed quote he had installed there 5 years earlier. Efficiency is the highest form of intelligence. She replaced it with a new plaque, one she'd commissioned quietly. It read, "Humanity is the highest form of leadership." Below it, a brass nameplate. "Room dedicated to the ones we forgot. We see you now." That afternoon, Carla made one final announcement. The executive boardroom would no longer be used for internal power meetings. It would become the Employee Restoration and Ideas Forum, open to any department, any level, to submit proposals, concerns, and cultural input on a rotating basis. The only rule? The room had to host at least one conversation per week, led by someone without a management title. She renamed the room the listening table. Some scoffed, some rolled their eyes, but the first to sit at that table? A 61-year-old night janitor named Reuben, who had worked at EG&C for 22 years and had never spoken in a meeting. His proposal? Fix the back dock lights before someone gets seriously hurt. It was approved by the end of the day. That Friday, Carla stood in the main lobby as employees exited for the weekend. No speech, no cameras, just her presence. One of the youngest interns, maybe 19, stopped and turned back. He looked nervous. "Miss Boone?" She smiled. "Just Carla." He nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you for seeing us." She tilted her head. "What makes you think I just started?" He blinked. "I've been seeing you," she said, "since before you knew how to be seen." He didn't know what to say. She didn't need him to. He walked away, straight. And as the doors closed behind the last employee, Carla turned, walked to the far wall where the names they erased still hung, and added one more brass tile beneath it. "This building doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the ones who stayed standing when no one clapped." That night, for the first time in her life, Carla Boone didn't lock her office door. She left it open, just in case someone wanted to speak.
There was a new sound in the building. Not loud, not sharp, but steady. Like laughter that didn't need permission. The kind of sound that comes when people stop holding their breath. Carla noticed it in the little things. The way people greeted each other at the coffee machine without looking over their shoulder. The way meetings ended with "thank you" instead of "we're done here." The way the elevator doors opened and anyone would say, "You going up?" The transformation hadn't been dramatic. There were no viral memos, no journalists outside the building, but the soul of the company had shifted. It started with the janitor logbook. Every night, Reuben, who had worked night shift longer than some interns had been alive, wrote a short message in the end of shift notes section. Not just about supplies, but about people. Cassandra in payroll stayed late to help someone with a time card issue. Give her a shout out. Light in stairwell D still flickering, but Anthony from security said he'd fix it himself if maintenance keeps dragging. He's good people. It was never required, but it was read. Carla had it sent to her inbox daily. At first, she just smiled. Then she started adding her own replies, written in pen at the bottom of the page. "Reuben, tell Cassandra I'm bringing her coffee Monday. Let's find out what kind she likes. Anthony's getting a bonus and a replacement bulb." Soon others joined in. By week 4, the janitor logbook had become a company-wide thread of gratitude. They renamed it unofficially the Book of What Matters. and it kept growing. One morning, Jocelyn, the receptionist turned junior tech, launched a small internal portal called Voices. It was simple, an open forum where any employee could share ideas, shout-outs, questions, or even just thoughts. The first post read, "I used to write things in my notebook and throw them away because I thought no one would care. Now I'm writing them here because maybe someone will." Within an hour, it had 27 comments. By noon, it had 200, but not all posts were praise. One said, "I still don't trust this. I've seen good ideas get stolen. Good people get punished for caring. I'm waiting to see if this lasts," Carla replied herself.
There was a new sound in the building, not loud, not sharp, but steady, like laughter that didn't need permission, the kind of sound that comes when people stop holding their breath. Carla noticed it in the little things, the way people greeted each other at the coffee machine without looking over their shoulder, the way meetings ended with "thank you" instead of "we're done here," the way the elevator doors opened and someone, anyone, would say, "You going up?" The transformation hadn't been dramatic. There were no viral memos, no journalists outside the building, but the soul of the company had shifted. It started with the janitor logbook. Every night, Reuben, who had worked night shift longer than some interns had been alive, wrote a short message in the end of shift notes section, not just about supplies, but about people. Cassandra in payroll stayed late to help someone with a time card issue, give her a shout out. Light in stairwell D still flickering, but Anthony from security said he'd fix it himself if maintenance keeps dragging. He's good people. It was never required, but it was read. Carla had it sent to her inbox daily. At first, she just smiled. Then she started adding her own replies, written in pen at the bottom of the page. "Reuben, tell Cassandra I'm bringing her coffee Monday. Let's find out what kind she likes. Anthony's getting a bonus and a replacement bulb." Soon, others joined in. By week 4, the janitor logbook had become a company-wide thread of gratitude. They renamed it unofficially the Book of What Matters, and it kept growing. One morning, Jocelyn, the receptionist turned junior tech, launched a small internal portal called Voices. It was simple, an open forum where any employee could share ideas, shout-outs, questions, or even just thoughts. The first post read, "I used to write things in my notebook and throw them away because I thought no one would care. Now I'm writing them here, because maybe someone will." Within an hour, it had 27 comments. By noon, it had 200. But not all posts were praise. One said, "I still don't trust this. I've seen good ideas get stolen. Good people get punished for caring. I'm waiting to see if this lasts." Carla replied herself. 11.1. It won't last unless you help us keep it alive. But I hear you, and you don't have to trust fast. Just speak when you're ready. She never got a reply. But 2 days later, that same user submitted a 3-page proposal to overhaul the outdated inventory system. It was implemented within the month. Meanwhile, at the warehouse, something happened that no one could have scripted. A forklift driver named Jaime started leaving sticky notes on damaged equipment with jokes written in marker. "This pallet jack has trauma. Handle with kindness. This shelf has trust issues. Don't load her too fast." People started adding their own. "This vending machine is on strike until we give better snacks." Someone printed a tiny sign and taped it above the water cooler. "This building is under quiet reconstruction. Please be kind to the workers, including yourself." Carla saw it on a walkthrough. She didn't remove it. She added a second note. "We're not rebuilding walls. We're teaching them to remember us." Not everyone adapted quickly. Some old managers pushed back. One director wrote an anonymous message to the board claiming Carla was turning EG and C into a therapy group with a balance sheet. Carla replied with a public memo. If listening is therapeutic, maybe silence was the real disease. The director resigned a week later. Reuben got promoted to facilities culture coordinator. He still cleaned sometimes, but only when he wanted to reset his perspective. He trained new hires not just in equipment, but in how to read a room, how to ask without overstepping, how to notice without judging. In one training, he said, "You don't have to wear a suit to hold a key. Sometimes you just have to stay long enough to hear the locks click. And in one quiet moment, Carla found herself standing in the third floor hallway, the same one where she'd once picked up that cursed slice of cake. She stood exactly where she had, closed her eyes, listened. This time, there was no one pointing at the floor, no one smirking, no footsteps walking away, just the distant hum of a printer, someone laughing down the corridor, the quiet wheeze of a coffee machine working too hard, and a janitor singing faintly to himself 2 halls down. She opened her eyes and smiled. This hallway remembered, and now, so did she.
It wasn't about headlines. There were none. No Forbes cover, no viral LinkedIn post, no op-ed titled From Janitor to CEO. That was never Carla Boone's goal. She didn't want attention. She wanted alignment, not applause, just accountability. Still, stories have a way of finding their breath, even when whispered. It started small. A podcast host who'd once worked as a temp at EG&C mentioned the night lady with the kind eyes who used to refill the vending machine when no one was looking, and how she apparently owned part of the company now. Then an industry newsletter published a quiet piece titled, "The Leadership You Miss Because You're Not Paying Attention." No names, no photo, just a story. Then came the students. 3 young women from a local business school showed up at EG&C headquarters unannounced, asking if they could see the wall. They meant the wall of the erased, the one Carla had helped build in the staff entrance. A security guard tried to turn them away. Carla happened to be walking through the lobby. She waved them in. One of the students asked her, "Did you really mop floors for 15 years while they laughed around you?" Carla looked at her and said, "They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing without listening. That's worse." The girl didn't say anything. But 2 weeks later, a class project went viral. Its title, "What Happens When the Janitor Keeps the Receipts?" Carla didn't respond. She didn't need to, because the building responded for her. Interns began asking to shadow non-executive departments. Drivers were consulted on shipping policy decisions. Custodial staff were included in annual planning meetings, not out of charity, but because their observations saved the company nearly $1.2 million in waste costs in just 6 months. And still, Carla refused to take the title CEO. "Titles come with walls," she once told Maya. "I want hallways." She instead held the role of organizational steward, a name she made up. It stuck. Every 2 months, she sat in a different department, not as a figurehead, as a contributor. One time in finance, someone challenged her on a P&L interpretation. She didn't pull rank. She said, "You might be right. Let's test it." The employee was right. They got a bonus. Carla got a reminder. Good leadership isn't about being right. It's about making right decisions easier to reach. One autumn afternoon, she received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photo, faded, of a man mopping the floors of the original Tacoma office. It was Leon, her husband. On the back, written in his unmistakable left-leaning scrawl, "Remember why we built it, to give people something to stand on, not something to kneel under." She cried for the first time in years, not because she missed him, because she carried him. That night, Carla hosted a quiet dinner in the company courtyard. No stage, just picnic tables, blankets, and soup catered from a local place that had once been too expensive for warehouse staff to order from. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought a dog. The lights were warm. The food was simple. The laughter was real. Carla sat between Reuben and Ernest Monroe, both of whom had come out of quiet corners to become the company's quiet backbone. At one point, Alonzo, the same warehouse driver who once asked about overtime, stood up, tapped his can of soda against his chair and said, "To the ones we didn't see, who kept showing up anyway." Someone else added, "To the woman who built a throne out of mop water." They all laughed. Carla didn't. She raised her glass and said, "To the house we built, and to every single hand that held a brick, even when no one looked." The courtyard went silent. Then Reuben said, "No more ghosts." Everyone nodded, and someone wrote those words on the wall by the exit. They've never been removed. And on the bottom floor in a small alcove near the utility entrance, there's a frame with nothing inside. No photo, no plaque, just the outline of a badge. Above it, a single line. She was always there. We just had to look down to see her. 6 months after the courtyard dinner, someone asked a question in the Voices portal that caught everyone off guard. It wasn't a complaint or a suggestion. It was just 7 words. What happens if Carla isn't here? There were no panic replies, no chain of fear. But the silence after that post lasted nearly a day. People weren't scared of losing control. They were scared of losing what they'd found: a rhythm of decency, an infrastructure of dignity, a workplace where humanity wasn't a bonus, it was a baseline. The question lingered like incense, subtle, persistent, sacred. Carla saw it late at night while reviewing facility logs. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she wrote a reply. Then it's your turn. And she meant it, because Carla never built this company to orbit around her. She built it to outlive her. In the weeks that followed, subtle signs of permanence began to appear. Not official mandates, not performance dashboards, but cultural signals, the kind of things you don't measure but feel. An IT team created a shadow systems playbook, documenting not just technical processes, but who people trust when systems fail. A driver training module was redesigned by a former janitor who understood visibility better than anyone else. The company onboarding manual was rewritten completely, no longer titled Welcome to EG&C, but instead, Welcome to a place where listening is leadership. They added a page near the back. No instructions, just a quote. Power doesn't come from the corner office. It comes from the person who sees what no one else notices and still chooses to care. CB. Carla never signed her initials. The team added them anyway. Meanwhile, requests for site visits began to come in. Not from shareholders, not from consultants, but from other companies, small business owners, nonprofits, even a public school principal. All asking the same thing. How did you change your culture? Carla invited them in, not to sit in a seminar, but to walk the halls, to talk with the janitors, the warehouse pickers, the cafeteria workers. One principal, after sitting in on a listening table session, turned to Carla and said, "This isn't a company. This is a conversation that refuses to die." Carla replied, "Then it's working." One afternoon, she walked by the break room bulletin board. Someone had posted a Polaroid photo of 4 employees laughing over instant ramen. No filter, no branding. Beneath it, scribbled in pen, "It's not perfect, but it's ours." She took a copy of that photo and pinned it inside her office door. It stayed there. Meanwhile, the Truth and Review panel, initially seen as a temporary measure, became a standing department with rotating members elected by staff vote. Ernest Monroe remained its heart. He didn't speak often, but when he did, people leaned in. A new staffer once asked him, "What's your real job title?" He smiled and said, "I help memory find its place." Carla once asked him if he wanted to write a book about his experience. He shook his head. "This place is the book," he said. "Every room is a chapter." Then there was Reuben, still showing up at 5:45 a.m. every now and then. Not to clean, but to greet the sun hitting the east windows of the warehouse. One day a young hire asked him why he still came so early. He answered, "The building still has something to say. I just like to hear it before the emails start yelling." One day during a leadership summit, Carla was asked to speak. She didn't prepare slides, didn't bring statistics. She walked on stage, held up a photo of her janitor badge, now broken in half, and said, "I'm not going to tell you how to lead. I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. The people who clean up after you are watching, and sometimes they're waiting, not for revenge, but for a reason to believe you care." Then she walked off stage. They gave her a standing ovation. She hated it. Back in Portland, life at EG&C continued. Not perfect, but real. They missed deadlines. They made mistakes. People disagreed. But now when that happened, someone always asked, "What would Carla do?" And then someone else would say, "No. What would we do if no one was watching?" That was the shift, and it stuck. It began the way all good transitions do, not with a proclamation, but with a whisper, a quiet calendar update, a brief line on the internal bulletin. Beginning Q3, Carla Boone will move into an advisory role. Operational leadership will be rotated through department-nominated stewards. There was no press release, no retirement photo op. Carla didn't leave. She simply stepped to the side. On the surface, it looked like a title shift, but those who'd worked under her knew better. This wasn't her leaving the room. It was her making room. She moved into a smaller office on the 5th floor, same floor as the customer care team. Her desk faced a brick wall, not the skyline. She said it helped her think straighter. Brick doesn't lie, she joked. Glass reflects too much ego. She let go of the executive email alias. From now on, her messages would come from a standard company address. She removed her nameplate. She kept her listening journal. And then she did something unexpected. She invited 6 staff members, handpicked not by her, but nominated anonymously by their peers, to join her in what she called the floor roundtable. No rank, no title, no agenda, just 6 chairs, one empty in the middle, and one rule. No one speaks twice until everyone's spoken once. At first they hesitated. Some thought it was a test. But then Ernest Monroe, still quiet but sharper than ever, said during the first session, "Maybe the most radical thing we can do is speak without expecting a response." That changed everything. They talked about policy, sure, but also about what the company felt like on Mondays, about how feedback was received in meetings, about who still sat alone at lunch, about why certain elevators got quiet when leadership walked in. They weren't just designing new protocols, they were designing presence. Meanwhile, the rest of EG&C adjusted, not to Carla's absence, she was still everywhere, but to their own emergence. Ruben was now heading onboarding culture. He taught new hires how to listen for silence, not just speak into it. "You can't clean a room if you don't know what kind of mess it's hiding," he told them. Jocelyn had become head of digital systems transformation. Her first act? Rewriting the old feedback system to allow employees to leave private gratitude entries, things no one else could see but the recipient. Alonzo, the once cynical driver, had been elected employee advocate representative. He had a desk now. He hated it. So he spent most of his time walking floor to floor, talking to people while leaning against door frames. Everyone talked back. Carla watched it all unfold, not like a founder, but like a gardener who finally saw the soil take root. And still, there were questions. In one all-staff forum, someone asked outright, "Why are you stepping back now?" Carla stood up. No microphone, no elevation. She just said, "Because leadership is not ownership, and control is not contribution. If I stay in the center forever, it means I never really trusted the circle." Silence. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. She winced. She hated applause, but she let it be. After the meeting, she left a sticky note on the listening table wall. "If the floor is yours, walk it with care, and don't forget to sweep behind the corners. That's where truth likes to hide." See. Later that month, she quietly removed herself from all committees, kept one Slack channel open, number sign still here if you need, no one misused it. Some just dropped in to say thanks. One message stood out. "I thought power meant talking first. You taught us it means being the last one to leave the room quietly." She replied with a single emoji, a trash can. Not because she was the janitor, but because she always would be. Not in title, in instinct. And every time someone picked up a chair, folded it after a meeting, turned off the light in a room no one else remembered, EG&C didn't just stay clean, it stayed conscious. Because the woman they never saw had made sure they would never stop looking. It was a Thursday, overcast, quiet, the kind of Portland sky that never quite chose between rain or fog. Just waiting. Carla Boone arrived earlier than usual. No one noticed, intentionally. By now, people understood that when she came in early, it wasn't because she had somewhere to be. It was because she had something to finish. She climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator. 5 flights, no rush. She stopped briefly at each floor, not to speak, just to look. At the new signs people had made, at the art on the walls, submitted by employees' children and framed by facilities, at the hallway light that used to flicker and now glowed steady. Little things, quiet signs of care. On the 6th floor, she turned left, past the listening table, past the HR wall now filled with thank you cards from terminated employees who'd been heard and honored. She reached her old office. Not the glass-wrapped CEO suite, the smaller one with the brick wall. Inside, the light was dim. On her desk, one plant, one legal pad, one fountain pen. She sat down. No one interrupted, no one knocked. She flipped open the pad and began to write. Not instructions, not reflections, just closure. March 14th. They won't remember what I wore. They won't remember the words I spoke in meetings or which version of the onboarding manual I approved. But they might remember that the coffee in the warehouse break room finally got replaced with the real stuff. That Ruben's logbook became a scripture. That someone bothered to ask the cafeteria staff what music they wanted playing in the kitchen. They'll remember that a hallway once used to embarrass me now holds a mural of gratitude. That the word janitor stopped being whispered like a footnote. That silence became a choice, not a sentence. And if I'm lucky, they'll remember that someone believed buildings could listen too, even when no one else did. She paused, tore the page gently from the pad, folded it in thirds, stood, and placed the paper, not in an envelope, but between two books on the shelf titled Organizational Culture, Myth and Reality in Quiet Power in Loud Spaces. Then she looked around. No photos on the wall, no souvenirs, just presence, exactly as she liked it. She stepped out, locked nothing, left the door open. At the stairwell, she ran into an intern. Raya, 19, barely knew the full history. The girl blinked. Miss Carla? Carla smiled. Just Carla. Are you leaving? Carla looked at her kindly. I've been leaving slowly for a while. Now I'm just getting out of the way. The intern hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think people like me will ever matter the way you did? Carla stepped forward, took the girl's hand, not dramatically, just warmly, and said, You already do. But if you ever feel invisible, don't wait to be seen. Act like someone's watching anyway, because one day they will. The girl nodded, and that was it. No banners, no farewell. Carla descended the stairs, one slow step at a time. When she reached the first floor, she passed the janitor's supply closet. Still clean, still stocked, still silent. She placed her hand on the doorknob, then let go. She walked outside. Rain had started, not heavy, just present. She didn't run. She didn't cover her head. She walked unbothered across the parking lot toward a car that wasn't parked in the executive row. Just an old hatchback, unwashed. And when she pulled away, no one knew. No one had to, because the building stood, and now it would keep standing. Not because of her name on a plaque, but because someone had finally taught it how to remember. And maybe that's the hardest part to accept, that for 15 years, the most powerful person in the company was pushing a mop, while everyone else pushed her aside. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She just listened, remembered, and waited. So if this story made you feel something, anger, admiration, or maybe just a little more hope, then share it. For every person who's been overlooked. For every quiet worker holding more strength than they're ever given credit for. And for every Carla still unseen in the hallway. Leave a comment below. Tell us who you're thinking about right now. Then hit that subscribe button, because we're not done telling stories like this. The world needs to hear them.